Hi there. Next week on Friday and Saturday will take place the biggest career event in Romania, Angajator de Top in Bucharest. It will take place at Sala Palatului, where on Saturday, on the 28th, will also take place the newest IT conference, I Love Tech. So don't lose your spot and register right now at the link you will find in the description or in the comments. Today, our guest is one of the speakers at the conference I Love Tech, Frank Pashut, developer advocate at Yuga DB. And we will talk about SQL databases core concepts and their modern significance. Welcome, Frank. How are you today?
Hey, I'm good.
We're so
Nice to
happy
be
to
there.
have you here. And I'm really curious to hear a lot more about it. I won't pretend I don't know much, so I'm very curious about it. Tell us to start just a few things by yourself.
Yeah, so currently I'm developer advocate. Before that, before joining Yugabyte, I've always been working with databases and mostly as a consultant, so going from customers to customers. Currently, I live in Switzerland. I've been working in Europe mostly.
Really interesting. And I'm curious, how did you choose SQL database as your specialty, let's say, as your project?
I've always been working in SQL databases from the beginning, and I really like what we do, but also the interaction with the users and the projects. And I moved to distributed SQL database recently when joining Yugabyte.
Really
But
interesting.
SQL, I have always done that SQL. Yeah,
It's always been, let's say, your passion.
yeah.
So for those that are new to this domain, can you give us a brief overview of what it's a distributed SQL database and why is it essential in today's landscape?
Yeah, the idea is that SQL databases exist for very long, but they had one limitation: they cannot scale out. They run on a single server. And today we want to scale everything to get elasticity, to go into the cloud. And for resilience, if you have multiple servers, if one is down, everything continues. But for databases, it was still a single server. And there were some databases with multiple servers, but without all the SQL features, or no SQL databases. And basically, distributed SQL that was started by Google Spanner. The idea is to have the same scalability as we have an application as we have with no SQL databases, but with the full SQL features.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I'm curious, how did you get started, and what advice would you give to someone considering to start a career within this field?
With distributed SQL, I think there are two different ways. Either, like I did, knowing SQL databases and then learning about distributed system. But there are also people who already knew distributed system but not databases, and then they learn databases. So you have those two paths, but you need to understand both. For me, I had a long experience on SQL databases, but I had to learn the what is different with distributed system and the replication algorithm and all that.
It's really interesting. And how do you, I'm curious, somebody that maybe is in the beginning of their career, they're planning to start their IT career and they kind of think, what should I specialize in? How do you make this choice? What do you think would help someone to decide to get specialized in SQL? And is this something you can learn just in school, or is something that you can also have an online certificate or certificate somewhere?
I think now SQL becomes more popular, but between the years 2000 and now, it was quite unpopular. So people didn't learn it at school, but now it's coming back again. The good thing is that today there are many open source databases. So you don't have to pay for a service. You don't have to pay for a license. You can just install on a container on your laptop and play with it. And online resources. As a developer advocate, one of my role is also to help user learn and quick start with it. So I write articles. I do some videos also with my colleagues. Everything, and we have also courses, university. People need to choose the best way. For example, I like to read articles. Some people prefer to learn from videos. So yeah, that's a short.
So I'm curious, where do we find these videos and these articles?
Oh, just Google for it. That's probably the best way. For example, Yugabyte has a YouTube channel and has documentations, but I think it's also good to look at the other databases to compare what is similar, what is different, and play with it. And also, I would recommend to people who learn. I would recommend to contribute. And contributing to open source is not only doing some code, even just giving some feedback about what works, what can be better in in the documentation. That's part of the contribution, and it helps a lot in learning. For example, I blog a lot, and I blog because I learn. Uh, this goes together. You learn and you share at the same time.
Yeah, and I've noticed IT. I was having this conversation recently. IT is one of the fields where people really, really like to build communities and help each other and progressing and learning more, which I think is just really cool. And other fields should follow the IT model. Can you share some real world applications and scenarios where distributed SQL database shine?
Yeah, the first thing people think about when the goal is to scale out are those big applications that need to run on more than one server. For example, we have big retail companies, big banks. They really need more than one machine to run. But even small databases may need to be always up. And if you run on a single machine, at some point, you have some maintenance, you have to stop it, or simply a failure. So even small databases can benefit from scaling out for high availability, for resilience. And if the volume and the throughput of transaction needs it, you can also scale by adding more servers. But there are those two cases. And there is also one that is coming more and more, geo distribution, because applications run with users everywhere in every country, and there are also some laws that control what must stay in one region or not. And when you scale out across multiple cloud region and have some control about the data placement, that's also a case, having a single logical database but on multiple regions rather than managing hundreds of different databases.
Really interesting. I was thinking we live really in a world where technology advances day by day. You can have a huge change every day of the week. So I'm curious, how are distributed SQL databases evolving to remain relevant and efficient?
Yeah, so distributing is a big evolution. There are features that evolve, but the big evolution was going to distributed SQL, because that was not as easy as with applications. With application, you can just spin up new servers, but a database as a state stores data, so you cannot just demultiply it without some consistency problems. So
Mhm.
this is where it evolves a lot today, distribution, and there are many ways, maybe for different use cases. The distributed SQL is more for transactional or LTP, because it keeps all the SQL properties about consistency, the ACID properties. But there are also other ones like sharding, where transparently one database is split into multiple databases. Those are big evolutions. I mean, the SQL databases went very far in terms of features, and now it's more about being resilient, being easy to operate in the cloud, automation.
Really interesting. If you would be to imagine the future, let's say in 5, 10 years from now, what would be like some biggest changes you think would happen?
Ah, that's a good question. I think it's very difficult to think about the future, because we can see the trends, but then it depends if the market goes to those trends or not. Um, Of course, databases will still be there, and I think SQL databases will still be there. I think we will see distributed databases more and more. Like when I started in IT, we stored the files in specific disks, and then we had SAN, NAS, and cloud storage that distributes transparently. And I think we will see the same with databases. But I don't know. And there are also other features that are coming. For example, people talk a lot about vector search today. So those features come to databases. We will see if it's just a trend like we had blockchain or whatever, or if it will stay. But yeah, there are some evolutions that we see coming.
Really cool. I'm curious, are there any tools or platforms that make working with distributed SQL database easier or more efficient, or maybe some of them that are your favorite that you could recommend?
Yeah, the point with when it is distributed, that's easy to scale. So every cloud native platform helps because you have this elasticity. So running on containers and that's something before working for Yugabyte, when I was working for monolithic databases like Postgres or Oracle, um, you don't really put a database in a container or in Kubernetes because it's one big monolith, hard to deploy, and you cannot really scale it. Now with those distributed SQL, you can really benefit from the scalability of containers, Kubernetes, or it can be VM in the cloud also, but Kubernetes is also a good platform when you need to scale the database, especially if you already have the application on Kubernetes, then you can also have the database on it.
Cool. And for someone keen on diving deeper into this domain, what resources or advice would you recommend?
Um, Play with it, try it, and contribute. I think everybody needs a database. That's also something I see when I go to developer conferences. There are not a lot of talks about databases, but when there is one, people are interested because everybody works with a database somewhere. So um, yeah, it's good to learn about the basic, even for developers who don't want to go into the detail of how it works. It's good to learn about the basics and uh, and go further if it's something interesting. So online online you can find all information and go into, yeah, as we mentioned before, go into communities, contribute, talk with people, and that's probably the best way. Yeah.
I'm curious, can you give me some examples maybe of your favorite communities or your favorite channels that you follow so we can, copy from you and try them as well?
Ah, that's a good question. I'm a lot on Twitter. I'm still a lot on Twitter, and this is where I've met a lot of people. I think it's the. Of course, we don't know the future of Twitter. That is not called Twitter anymore, by the way. But I still say Twitter. I think it's the easiest way to be in contact with important people, not important people, but but people that do a lot in community. I think it's the easiest way to contact because it's a mix of professional sharing, but more fun and more friendly than, for example, LinkedIn. I share some things on Twitter that I will not share in LinkedIn. So it's probably more friendly. That's what I use a lot today to contact people. But LinkedIn and contributing on GitHub can also be a good way to be in contact with people. For example, with Gigabyte, we have a community Slack. That can be interesting, but today maybe we have too many Slack channels everywhere, so yeah, need to focus on some channels.
What about some YouTube channels or some websites where you keep updated with all the new information, the news in IT? Do you have any favorite channels of that kind? Or
Yeah,
Twitter is kind of where you get most of your news and most of your information?
yeah, there are a few ones. I don't know all the names because I just follow them. Uh, there is the Geek Narrator podcast,
The Geek
where
Narrator podcast.
yeah,
Oh,
Geek
I
Narrator.
like the title. So the
Yeah, yeah,
Geek Narrator podcast.
it's running by I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Geek Narrator podcast. You can find it, and I've learned a lot about many things about even databases which I don't know, and other systems. Yeah, that's probably the one I follow the
The
most. Yeah.
most cool. So we're going to ask Twitter and this podcast to also share us. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Frank, and I'm going to ask you, what are you excited about at I Love Tech in Bucharest?
Oh, I'm always excited to meet communities. When before being a developer advocate, I was mostly going to database conferences where it's interesting, but you always meet the same people. And now I want to meet the users, the developers, and discuss with them. And I think this kind of conference is really interesting. Also, um, I, I I like that also because I focus on databases, but conferences is also the occasion to hear about other topics that are not my daily job, but interesting to know.
And what do you think that people that come to I Love Tech or that should come to I Love Tech, would they be excited about? What do you have any, I know, snippets of what you're going to share with them?
For my session, I will try to explain a bit those distributed SQL databases, why it's needed. I hope also that I also from discussions, knowing. I mean, we are building a new database and thinking that it solves many problems, but it's important also to keep in mind what people need. Maybe people are happy with their current database and doesn't make sense to always change everything just because it's new. So it's also good to discuss with people and get the feedback to understand really what are the needs and the problem to solve, and not trying to add more complexity somewhere if it doesn't solve a real problem.
Great. So I am happy and excited to meet you. So it's going to be next Saturday on the 28th at Sala Palatului. And also will take place there the Angajator de Top event in Bucharest, which will be on Friday and Saturday as well at the same place, Sala Palatului. So I'm curious to get your viewpoint of the entire event in the end. And also for those that have listened to us, don't forget to reserve your spot for Angajator de Top and I Love Tech at the links that we will leave in the comments. And also, if you have any questions for Frank, maybe you need some specific resources or his opinion on something, leave it in the comments and we'll try to put you in contact and get the answers as soon as possible. Thank you, Frank, for being here. And
Thank you
I'm
very
looking
much,
forward to
and
see
looking
you.
forward for the conference. Yeah.
Yes, see you next week.